Hey, how's it going? I hope you're fine. I am fine. Welcome to the Movie Quotes Jones review of the first season of The Man in the High Castle, which is showing on Amazon Prime right now. Um, the show, quick plot summary, and then we'll get right into it. Takes place in a alternate post World War II future, I believe in the 1960s, and it follows our two main characters, Juliana Crane and Frank Frink. We'll come back to that. Uh, and their quest to, survive in this dystopic United States, where the German uh, Nazi Party controls the east coast of the country and Imperial Japan controls the west coast. In between is an inexplicable neutral zone, which I will never understand why it's there. Maybe they explained it and I just didn't catch it. And antics ensue in this neutral zone as well. So I'm just going to kind of fire from the hip here. I don't script these. Why don't we start with... Where do I want to start? Let's start with the characters. Now, I don't really strongly dislike any of the characters, except for there is this one guy in kind of the middle of the first season when they're in the neutral zone who plays like a bounty hunter, and he's coming after Juliana Crane, and his name is the Marshal, and he is a bounty hunter. Now, he reminded me of... Actually, this is a good starting off point. He reminded me of Frank Vitti from The Untouchables. Remember him, the really mean like hitman that blasts Sean Connery to ribbons with a machine gun at one point? He reminded me of a knockoff of that character. But the difference is that I believed that character. I don't remember the name of the actor who played him. Some guy who played Bly in Briscoe County Jr. But he was a scary villain. This guy, the Marshal, seemed like he was doing a caricature. And I'm glad that I brought that up first, because I have a problem with some of the characters in that they're caricatures. They're not as over the top and like bad as this guy is, though. I mean, every time he came on screen, I'm like, ooh, I'm so scared. Look, he's chewing out a match. Oh my god, he's got a shotgun. And he talks really mean and he gets up in people's face. Ooh, I'm so scared. I wasn't scared. I was like, okay, all right, he's a mean guy, whatever, you know? Probably the least convincing role. I probably believed him the least of absolutely anybody. Now, the characters, the Japanese characters, the chief inspector, the guy who was interrogating Frank Frink, in the second episode, and the head of like the police. His name is Chief Inspector Takeshi Kido. And then his counterpart for the Nazis would be Obergruppenführer John Smith, played by Rufus Sewell. Sewell? Let's just call him John Smith. They are very underwhelming as villains. It's like I've seen villains played like this over and over and over and over again. Just not really very original. Though I will say that Inspector Kido gets better, in my opinion, over time. He goes from being a very generic cookie-cutter villain to being pretty intense and intimidating over the course of time. Probably the most captivating character so far would be the guy who plays the trade minister, Nobusuke Tagomi, the trade minister of the Pacific States of America. I'm not really sure what a trade minister is, but he is played by Kiri Hiroyuki Tagawa, and he's on point. I really liked him. I thought he was an interesting guy. Alexa Davalos as Juliana Crane, and Rupert Evans as Frank Frink. I just can't say it without giggling. Okay, I mean, they were obviously the good guys. You know, Joe Blake, played by Luke Kleintank. Okay, he was pretty cool too. His character kind of straddles the line between, is he actually a good guy caught in a bad spot, or is he a bad guy taking advantage of others? And it's really hard to tell. I'm about halfway through the second season now, and I honestly still don't know. We're just going to have to keep checking it out, I guess. Okay. So those are the main characters, and they mostly have good chemistry. I get real tired of Frank. I don't know, just something about him. I'm just kind of like, you know, I don't know. And I'm not really blown away by Juliana Crane either. I'm just not, okay? It's fine. She's fine. She's fine. She's fine. Honestly, my favorite of the main cast, aside from those two that I mentioned, Keto and Tagomi, is probably Dweebnik, which is what I call DJ Qualls from Road Trip. He plays Frank's buddy Ed, who works in the factory with him, and he is just such a sympathetic character who I really appreciate, and I'm enjoying watching his character progress through the second season. He forms a bond with like a pawn shop or a like an American goods shop owner called Robert Childen, and it's interesting to watch them interact. So, okay, cool. So characters range from flat out, straight up caricature to pretty compelling. Which is okay. It's okay to have range. It's okay to have range. I wish there wasn't shit. The guy that played Diet Vidi, the guy who played the Marshal, was shit. I mean, he was just bad. Every time he was on screen, I was like, I hope it ends soon. They do a couple things that I don't understand why they do it. They have a really interesting storyline to work with, a very interesting premise. Why do they insist on making me think they're going to kill a main character every episode? This show has 4 seasons, and I'm pretty sure they're working on a 5th right now. I know you're not going to kill Juliana Crane, and I know you're not going to kill Frank, like, almost immediately. 2nd, 3rd, 4th episode. I know you're not. You're just not. They're not ancillary characters. But at least 2 or 3 of the episodes end with you, I guess, supposed to be sweating marbles hoping that they live. You know they're going to live, man. That actually happens twice in the 2nd season opening. Now, I guess I can understand why you would do that in the 1st episode of the 1st season. Because, you know, maybe they didn't realize they were going to get renewed, and they're trying to get you and grab you by the lapel and get you into it. They say, psych, we're not going to actually kill this person twice in the 1st episode of the 2nd season. And again, both times I'm like, she's not dead. I'm not worried for a second. Okay, let's talk about their attention to detail. It's hit or miss. It's very hit or miss. I'm really happy that they brought Reinhard Heydrich into it. They kept him around. In this alternate reality, Reinhard Heydrich survives. Now, if you're not familiar with who Heydrich is, he was basically the... Okay, so if you have the Holocaust, right? The guy who basically planned and did everything was a dude named Heinrich Himmler. And Reinhard Heydrich, was his second in command. And he basically put together the Wannsee Conference, which is the meeting that they had to deploy the last terrible stages of the final solution, which later became known as the Holocaust or the Shoah. He was actually assassinated and was not able to see his vision through, but he was such a nasty guy, he was such a feared dude, that when they did build the death camps, the Holocaust death camps, these are Sobibor, Treblinka, Belzec, and Helmno was one. That was actually called Operation Reinhard in his honor. That's how nasty of a guy he was. And he was a nasty dude in this, too. And he actually even kind of looked like what I would imagine Reinhard would look like at an old age. If you don't believe me, look it up. I thought that was a nice touch. He gets kind of swept under the rug when you're taught about the Holocaust in school. Like, you don't hear that name unless you do some reading. And I'm glad that they included him. And I'm also glad about what happened to him. They kept the German titles. In particular, we have an Obergruppenführer, which means group captain. And his name is Obergruppenführer John Smith. Now, on the surface, I thought that sounded kind of silly. Like, there's a point in time where Joe Blake says, I report to Obergruppenführer Smith. And I kind of giggled a little bit. I was like, oh, that sounds really hilarious. But maybe that is kind of supposed to be like, you take this really common American name that everybody's used to, like John Smith, and you pair it with an, culturally evil-sounding title of the SS, like Obergruppenführer. And that might be like an indication of the normalcy that people, have come to accept as their way of life, that you have, it's a normal name with not so normal of a title on it. You understand what I mean? So it's kind of an eerie juxtaposition of the two. And in the end, I actually appreciate it. They do keep in place people who are terminally ill or people who have serious mental capacities or serious mental deficiencies are taken to euthanasia clinics and euthanized. This actually becomes a major plot point in the second season. That's something else that we don't really get taught a whole lot about. So it's nice to see in high school. It's nice that they kept it in. I liked it. I mean, I don't like the idea, but I like that it was a crucial part of the show. On the Japanese side of things, they have this slang term that I assume is supposed to be derogatory or pejorative. They refer to as I think they're called pons, Pons, which is ostensibly short for Nippon, which is how you pronounce the word Japan in Japanese. I'm split on this because why don't they call them pons? It's Nippon, it's not Nippon. Also, on the same note, the Nazis in this show are very frequently referred to as Nazis, both in the text overlays and by the characters. As far as I know, the Germans themselves did not refer to themselves as Nazis. Nazi is a pejorative term that everybody else used who did not like them to describe them. This would be like if the Japanese referred to themselves as Japs or Pons. Doesn't make any sense. At the same time, they also call them Japs. So, did we need an extra pejorative? Probably not, but I honestly kind of like it. Now, the miss side of this attention to detail that I'm talking about would be like, Frank is being... In the second episode, Frank has been captured by the Japanese and he's being held in a prison. And he's getting the shit beaten out of him constantly, and I'm sure that they're feeding him, mud sandwiches and sawdust bread and shit like that. And he's all beat up and bruised and bloody, but his teeth are pearly white. And the same thing happens to Ed, played by Dweebnik, in the second season. All dirty and disgusting, eating mud sandwiches, probably drinking tea, and that's all, or water. And his teeth are pearly, reflective, shiny white. Really? Like, throw some dirt in those teeth, man. I'm not convinced. I guess my main issue, if I had to pick something that pissed me off the most about this show, it's that there is literally no subtlety of any kind. The only subtlety that I see that is actually treated as subtle is the name Juliana Crane. Or Juliana, as they pronounce it. Oh, Juliana, oh my lord. Her last name is Crane, but it's spelled Crain, and she's into Aikido, and she seems okay with the Japanese style of life, that they've come to embrace being under Imperial control. And there's origami that is made throughout the first few episodes, and as far as I understand it, a crane is a very common, possibly introductory level origami shape to make. And so I think that was kind of as close as they came to truly being subtle. It's spelled different, but it's pronounced crane. Maybe I'm looking too far into it, but I appreciated that, if that's what they were going for. Then you have, smack you over the head, hey man, in case you're 6 years old, here's what we're trying to get at. And it starts right at the beginning with that fucking theme song that I talked about in my pre-mortem. It's just okay, it's supposed to be sinister, I get it. You're already waving a Nazi flag in my face. I and Rodgers and Hammerstein don't need your help. We got this. Okay? I have a brain and eyes. I understand. Really hitting the nose on the head. Really hitting the nail on the head is the end of episode 8 of season 1. This episode is called End of the World. And at the very end of the episode, some shit goes down. Real shit goes down. And she's in this club. Juliana is in this club. And they're playing the jazz tune End of the World. And all the lyrics are in Japanese except the title line End of the World. And it's kind of what it reminded me of was, have you ever seen the Peter Jackson King Kong movie when they first wake Kong up and that lady is speaking to them in whatever language it is that she speaks, and she keeps going, you know, I'm going to butcher the language because I don't know what it was, and I haven't seen that piece of shit movie in a long time. But she's going, blah, 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 Kong, blah, 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 Kong, blah, 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 Kong. Okay, I get it. You're talking about King Kong. Well, they do the same exact thing with this song, singing in Japanese, and then she sings the end of the world. And that happens 3 or 4 times. If they left it in the background and just let it go, it might have been acceptable to me. But they end the episode with her singing that line, which is unsatisfactory not only because it's an unresolved harmony, but because it makes me think that they don't think that I'm going to notice what they're doing. Like, leave some subtlety in. Just some. A little. Please. Now, there was 1 or 2 scenes in particular that I really, really liked that I thought were interesting to check out. There's one point in time where this antique dealer, who is pretty fascinated with the Japanese culture, and he is invited over to a wealthy client's house for dinner, and he gets there. And the house is very Americanized. These are Japanese people that he goes and visits. The house is super Americanized. You know, there are bookshelves and stuff set up. There are model airplanes and stuff in the house. And they sit down to dinner, and it's like a steak and some corn and I think some potatoes. And the wife of the family goes, "We like to eat American food." And it's really, you know, the steak is not quite cooked correctly. It's very, very undercooked in the middle. And it just looks like a really good imitation of an American meal. And the reason that I really like that is because I like to cook ethnic food. And without a lot of practice, my ethnic food just comes off as an imitation. And I thought that it was interesting, you know, people in this country, it's like exoticism for them. People in this country are into, for example, Japanese food, you know, sushi, or Indian food, curry, or whatever, you know. Well, this was that, but backwards. These are Japanese people, and they're into, you know, hamburgers and ragtime jazz and that kind of stuff. And I really liked that. I was like, this is really clever and interesting when I watched it. That was pretty cool. I like that. That's probably my favorite scene out of all of it. I'm trying to think if I missed anything. I just want to keep this as short and sweet as I can. Anyhow, if I were to put a letter grade on this, I would probably give it like a B-. Just because some of the, like I said, there's just a complete, let's give it a C. Let's give it a C. Just because the interesting story, the 2 or 3 truly fantastic characters, some of the twists and turns that you don't see coming, you're not sure, you know, who everybody is loyal to for most of the time, specifically Rudolph Wegener and Lem, the guy from the Sunrise Diner. You're never really sure what side these guys are all on, right up until the very end. And there's some really good twists and turns. There's a twist ending at the end of the first episode that I did not see coming at all. But in spite of all the interesting stuff and the great storyline, the beat you over the fucking head nature of the lack of subtlety in the presentation. I mean, the music that is selected, the camera work, the lighting, it is all so on the nose that I just feel like I'm being pandered to far too often. Now, would I recommend that you check the show out?
Yeah.
Because the storyline is riveting, and I really want to see what's going to happen. I hope it doesn't pull a Dexter and have a couple of really great seasons and then just faceplant. Check it out if you feel like it, if you need something to watch, you know, at the end of the day while you're having your undercooked steak and corn kernels. Give it a watch. Fuck it, why not? If you don't like it, you can always change it. Okay, I hope you enjoyed my review of the first season of Man in the High Castle. I'll get another season out when I can. Alright. Bye.